Arcane is an animated series released in 2021, created by the animation studio Fortiche. The series is based upon the lore and stories in League of Legends, a multiplayer online battle arena video game released in 2009. The show follows Powder, a child whose parents died at a young age and was adopted by a man named Vander, who had also adopted Milo, Clagger, and Vi. Vander was a good-hearted man who was a well-respected citizen of the Lanes, the undercity of Zaun. Arcane achieves what other movies and TV series lack in, portraying mental illness in a sympathetic and understandable way. Powder's parents died from an accident when she was young. Despite it not being her fault, she suffers from survivor's guilt. Survivor's guilt is when someone blames themselves for being the only one in a group to survive, despite not being responsible for anyone's deaths. The show does not romanticize mental illness either. A good example of this is Harley Quinn from DC Comics. Harley Quinn was physically and mentally abused, yet she is also sexualized and seen as the crazy gothic nightmare girl, which is the polar opposite of the manic pixie dream girl. These character types are often sexualized online and seen as hot, despite these characters being manic or mentally ill. Powder, referred to as Jinx later in the series, is a victim of her own actions. This usually ends up hurting her, even when she attempts to help her loved ones. The series separates mental illness from villainy, even when the two coincide during the events of the show. The writers achieve this by constantly reminding the audience how her actions hurt herself. For example, when Jinx attempts to save her friends and family from a crazed monster, she throws a grenade towards the monster and ends up causing immense destruction. Powder's character is specialized in creating gadgets and grenades to engage from far away because of her apparent lack of strength, both physically and mentally. The explosion hurt the monster, but in turn killed two of her orphan brothers and Vander, the man who orphaned and cared for these children. Vander's last words to Vi were, "Take care, Powder." The situational irony in this scene is how Jinx is excited after the fact, and exclaims, "It finally worked!" Then the realization of the consequences of her actions set in. Her own sister, Vi, struck her across the face and abandoned her for inadvertently killing their adoptive father and brothers. Someone who loses their parents early on, and when their own brother constantly taunts them for their weakness, would likely have a very low self-esteem. To remedy this, Powder searches for a figure to trust with all of their might. In Powder's case, this person was Vi, who is her older sister and guardian. Powder saw a parental figure in Vi, and also someone that will never abandon her, which is one of her main fears. After the events of the explosion and the deaths of Clagger, Milo, and Vander, Vi says to Powder that she's a Jinx, and that she's always been one. Vi left Powder behind at the site of where Vander died. Then a man named Silco approached Powder, expecting some sort of resistance from her, but she instantly left into the lap of Silco. This shows the vulnerability of Powder after her essential figure left her behind. Silco is not a good man, though. He plans to seize Piltover, the Overcity, violently, and control both Piltover and Zaun, the Undercity. Silco also sees himself in Powder, because both of them were betrayed by the only family they had. Following the events of Vi leaving her sister, Powder went with Silco, and he gave her the tools necessary to create even more gruesome gadgets. Silco sympathizes with Powder, while also allowing and encouraging her to become a killer. This is the time where Powder changes her name to Jinx, which is no small detail. The name Jinx is referred to a few times before, when Milo said she was a Jinx, and the time Vi abandoned her. The name Jinx is a coping mechanism for her apparent bad luck, and her guilt, following the deaths she had inadvertently caused. Jinx allows herself to transform into someone completely different, a killer without a family. Jinx is heavily implied to have schizophrenia throughout the show by having the voices of her dead brothers in her head. Jinx is also likely to have post-traumatic stress disorder and borderline personality disorder. Jinx has flashbacks to Vi and her other family members later in the show, followed by panic attacks. This is an example to prove Jinx's PTSD diagnosis. Jinx also lashes out at her new crew members, which is one of the many symptoms of borderline personality disorder. The culmination of her losing her parents at a young age, accidentally killing two of her adoptive brothers and her adoptive father, also Vi abandoning Powder, led to severe trauma and mental illness. The creation of Jinx's character is more than just a backstory. It displays how destructive mental illness is, and how childhood trauma can be. This brief analysis strives to show how Arcane tackles such a difficult topic, being mental illness. The series manages to show the symptoms of these mental illnesses in such a way that is accurate and not offensive, and seem realistic despite it being an animated show.